The sound of my fingers tapping against the calculator keys echoed softly in my little home office. I had 30 minutes before I had to pick up my son, and I was determined to finish this client's year-end statement. That space, my desk, the window with its half-closed blinds, the faint hum of the old heater, was my sanctuary, a place I built out of necessity and love. "Mom, are you done yet?" Noah's head peeked around the corner. His sandy hair flopped slightly as he tilted it, waiting for my answer. His big green eyes reminded me so much of his father, in ways that were both comforting and painful. "Almost, buddy," I said, picking up my coffee mug. "Did you finish your homework?" He held out a sheet with tiny pencil marks across it. "Math's all done. But I need help with history." I smiled. Noah was my pride, not just for his grades, but for his kindness, his curiosity, the way he could light up a room with his goofy grin. It had been just the two of us for a long time now. After my father passed away from a heart attack 5 years ago, things shifted. My responsibilities grew heavier, but I carried them. Quietly. Without complaint. 10 more minutes, okay? Then I'm all yours. That was when the phone rang. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. "Hi, Mom." "Aurora, we need to talk about tomorrow's dinner," came my mother's sharp, clipped voice. "Alina is bringing her fiancé. You're coming, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. The tone wasn't a request. It never was with her.
"Yeah."
"I'll bring Elias too." She let out a sigh.
"Fine.
"Just make sure he behaves. This is a big moment for your sister." Of course it was. Everything was always about Alina. "What does her fiancé do?" I asked, my voice careful. "Julian Parker. Investment banking. His family's got money, old money. And he's Ivy League. Harvard." Her voice swelled with pride. "He's perfect for her. So refined, cultured." I stopped listening. My mother's world had always revolved around status. Polished shoes, luxury watches, elegant smiles. In her eyes, I was just the one who wore flats and paid bills. I hung up and stared at my laptop screen for a long second. I heard Noah humming to himself in the next room, probably doodling aliens on his notebook again. My chest tightened. He didn't say it often, but he noticed. How Grandma looked past him. How Aunt Alina never asked him questions. But he never let it break his spirit. Neither did I. Tomorrow, we would walk into that big suburban house, the one filled with laughter that felt hollow and smiles that never reached the eyes, and we would stand tall. We always did. Vivian's house always felt colder than it should have. The marble floors, the high ceilings, the fresh white lilies in every corner, it was all supposed to feel welcoming, but I never belonged in it. As Noah and I stood at the front door, I took a deep breath and gave his small shoulder a squeeze. "You ready?" He nodded. "I'll be okay, Mom." His voice was steady, but I knew the look in his eyes. That quiet readiness he put on like armor every time we came here. Vivian opened the door herself.
"Aurora."
"Elias. You're late." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as usual. "We're right on time," I replied, stepping inside. The air smelled of designer candles and roasted duck. Laughter floated in from the living room, that high-pitched, polished sound that could only belong to my sister. "Come in," Vivian said curtly, walking ahead of us. "Alina and Julian are waiting." Alina was perched on the edge of the cream sofa, swirling a glass of wine in her hand. Her hair was perfect, her dress expensive, and just revealing enough to show confidence without seeming desperate. When she spotted us, she stood and flashed a wide smile. "Aurora, so glad you made it," she said, then added almost mechanically, "Elias." The man beside her stood up and turned toward us. He was tall, clean-cut, dark hair neatly combed, his suit fitted like it belonged on a magazine cover. "This is Julian Parker," Alina said proudly, looping her arm through his. Julian extended his hand toward me. His smile was soft, polite. "It's nice to finally meet you, Aurora. Alina's told me about you." There was something in his voice that made me pause, not just the way he spoke, but how he looked at me. Familiar. I shook his hand. It was warm, steady. "Nice to meet you too." Julian turned to Elias. Hey, big man. What grade are you in? Fifth, Elias said shyly. Fifth grade was my favorite year, Julian smiled. That's when I built my first science fair project, a full volcano. It exploded all over the gym. Elias laughed. That sounds awesome. Julian grinned. It was. I bet you do a better job than I did, though. It was such a simple moment, but I felt it something shift. A softness that wasn't fake. He didn't just look at my son. He saw him. Aurora, Alina called from across the room. You're not wearing that to the wedding, are you? I turned. What? I mean, you're not a bridesmaid, obviously, she added, eyes glittering with amusement. But still. I didn't respond. I just smiled. Small. Calm. Vivian chimed in. We decided not to overwhelm you. You have enough on your plate being a single mother. My nails pressed into my palm. But I nodded. That quiet nod I'd perfected over the years. Only Julian looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, eyes flicking toward me, with something like apology. I gave him the smallest smile I could manage. I wasn't used to anyone noticing. Most days, I found myself staying late at Vivian's house, quietly ironing out details for the wedding, confirming vendors, rechecking the seating chart, even correcting spelling errors in the printed programs. Alina was too busy with dress fittings and makeup trials to bother with anything boring, and Vivian had made it clear that logistics were beneath her. So they handed everything off to me, not with gratitude, but with expectation. I never argued. I was good at this kind of thing. My life as an accountant had taught me how to manage chaos with calm. I did it for Elias. For peace. For quiet. Helping again? Julian's voice surprised me. He stood in the doorway of the study, sleeves rolled up, holding a cup of coffee. I'm just fixing the RSVP list, I said without looking up. The calligrapher messed up 3 names. And, apparently, Alina forgot she invited 2 of her exes. Julian chuckled and walked in. Mind if I join you? I looked up. Sure. He sat beside me, glancing over the list. His eyes lingered on the notes I'd scribbled in the margins, all neat, color-coded, specific. You're really saving this wedding, he said quietly. Not the first time I've saved something that didn't belong to me, I replied. Then I instantly regretted saying it out loud. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, carefully. And something in his gaze made me shift to my seat. You know, he said after a long pause, I keep feeling like I've met you before. I froze for half a second. I was thinking the same thing. He stared at me, brows furrowed. Do you know someone named Caroline? And that was when it clicked. Caroline. Bright, brave Caroline. A young woman I had once sat beside in a hospital room when I volunteered after my own recovery. Her smile despite the pain, her dark hair tucked under scarves, her little brother who used to sit in the corner and sketch spaceships in the margins of old magazines. Julian. My breath caught. You're Caroline's brother. His face went still, then softened. You remember. I never forgot her, I said, voice shaking just slightly. She changed me. I was just trying to give back. After what I survived. I was 20 then, Julian said slowly. I used to watch you read to her. You made her laugh, even on the worst days. We sat in silence for a moment. She used to talk about you, he continued. Said you were like a big sister. Said you reminded her what it felt like to be alive. I blinked hard. I never thought I'd see you again. Julian turned to face me fully now. Neither did I. But now that I have, he trailed off. Something flickered in his eyes. A realization. A shift. I knew that look. He was seeing Alina differently now. He was remembering what kindness really looked like. A few days before the wedding, my phone buzzed with an unexpected call. It was Julian. I need to talk to you about something, he said, his voice steady but serious. I want you to be the maid of honor. I blinked in disbelief. Julian. Alina didn't even ask me to be a bridesmaid. I know, he said softly. But I asked her. I insisted. Family should be part of this day. Especially the ones who actually show up when it matters. His words were sincere, and something about them made my throat tighten. I don't want to make things worse, I said quietly. I'll handle it, Julian promised. Just say yes. I did, even though my stomach churned with doubt. The next morning, Vivian called. Her voice was like ice. What were you thinking, Aurora? Alina is crying. You just had to make this about you, didn't you? I didn't ask him, I said calmly. Julian offered. Vivian scoffed. Of course he did. You always find a way to play the victim. You're trying to ruin your sister's day. I looked out the window at Elias in the yard, chasing leaves in the wind. I'm not trying to ruin anything. If Amanda doesn't want me as maid of honor, she can say it. I'll step back. You can't step back, Vivian snapped. Julian's already told everyone. Just don't make a scene. Please, Aurora. Don't make this day about you. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The day of the wedding, Elias and I arrived early. I wore a modest blue dress, simple, quiet, like me. My hair was tied back in soft waves, and Elias, in his tiny suit, held my hand as we entered the grand church. You look beautiful, Mom, he whispered. Thank you, I whispered back, squeezing his hand. Inside the bridal room, Alina barely glanced at me. Her bridesmaids buzzed around her, fluffing her dress and adjusting her earrings. She didn't speak to me once. Vivian sat in the corner, watching everything like a queen on her throne. When I walked in, she muttered, That dress, well, it's just like you. Plain. I smiled gently. I had spent my whole life being called plain. It didn't sting anymore. When the ceremony began, I stood just behind Alina, holding her bouquet when it was time, smiling for the photographs, moving gracefully through every step, not for them, but for myself. Elias sat in the front row, watching me with quiet pride. That's what kept me grounded. His soft gaze, the way he gave me a thumbs up when no one else was looking. In the midst of all the cold smiles and glittering lights, he was my warmth. And as I caught Julian's eyes from across the altar, I could tell. He saw everything. Every slight, every silence, every moment I stayed graceful when it would have been easier to break. The ceremony began with quiet organ music and the soft rustle of expensive fabric. I stood just behind Alina, bouquet in hand, trying to breathe evenly as cameras flashed. My sky blue dress was simple, intentionally understated, something that would not draw attention. But somehow it did. Alina never looked at me once during the ceremony. Her eyes were only for the crowd, the flowers, the spotlight. Vivian sat front row, lips pursed in an expression that fell somewhere between judgment and pride, depending on who she was looking at. Julian glanced back at me once as the vows were being exchanged. He gave a brief, almost imperceptible smile. I returned it, a silent thread of understanding between us. Everything felt rehearsed, polished, until the reception. As guests laughed over champagne and the soft buzz of conversation filled the hall, Alina took the microphone for her speech. Her white gown glittered under the lights as she stood at the center of the room, smiling like a princess. But something about her smile twisted as she turned toward me. And now, she said sweetly, I want to take a moment to thank my maid of honor, my dear sister, Aurora. People clapped. I gave a polite nod. Alina's voice took on a syrupy tone. Aurora is a single mother. She raised a child all on her own. Isn't that brave? She paused dramatically. So brave to live life without ever being truly loved. A few nervous chuckles spread across the room. I froze. Anyone looking to adopt? She added with a smirk. She's still available. The room filled with laughter. Not from everyone, but enough. I felt Elias' tiny hand slide into mine under the table. He was shaking. Just kidding, Alina laughed, waving her hand like it was all a harmless joke. We love you, sis. Before I could even process it, Vivian rose to her feet, smiling. Our Aurora has always been the quiet one. Reliable, a little dull perhaps, but second-hand goods still have value. Especially with a built-in child. This time, the laughter was louder. I could not breathe. My eyes burned, but I held it together for Elias. I slowly stood, intending to walk out, But before I could move, another chair scraped against the floor.
Julian.
He stood, red-faced, his hands clenched at his sides. The room fell silent. He walked to the center, took the mic gently from Alina's hand, and looked out at the guests. "Excuse me," he said, his voice even but heavy. "I need to say something." Alina laughed nervously. "Julian, what?" He raised a hand to silence her. "Tonight was supposed to be the most important day of my life," he said. "But it turns out the most important part hasn't been the wedding itself. It's been the truth." I sat frozen, Elias gripping my arm tightly. Julian looked directly at me. "Aurora and I didn't meet for the first time last month. We met years ago, when my sister, Caroline, was dying." Gasps rippled through the crowd. She was in her 20s, fighting leukemia. Aurora was a hospital volunteer back then. She brought books, songs, stories, and hope. I stared at him, stunned. She became Caroline's friend, her light. And one day, she brought her little boy, Elias.
He was just 5.
He made drawings for Caroline. They were her treasures. She called him her little sunshine. Elias looked up at me, wide-eyed. I never forgot her. Or him. Or Aurora. Julian turned to Alina and Vivian. "What I heard from both of you, about this woman and her son, was nothing but cruelty. And it ends tonight." Alina's face crumpled. "Julian, please." He ignored her. "I'm calling off this wedding." Gasps again. One woman in the back dropped her glass. Vivian stood, face pale. "You don't know what you're saying. We spent. I'll pay for everything." Julian cut her off. "Every last flower. Every plate of food. Send the bill to my office." He walked straight over to Elias and knelt. "Thank you for being the sunshine you were and still are." Then he turned to me and extended his hand. "Come with me." My body moved before my mind could catch up. I stood, Elias stood with me, and I took Julian's hand. We walked out together, past a stunned crowd, past the photographers, past the glitter and the noise. Behind us, Alina screamed his name, makeup smudged, voice trembling. Vivian chased after her, trying to hold her up. But we never looked back. That night, we found ourselves at a quiet restaurant near the coast, tucked away from the noise of the city and the chaos we had just walked out of. The three of us sat at a small table on the terrace, overlooking the dark waves below. The sea breeze was gentle, the lights soft, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe again. Elias sat between us, tracing his finger along the wooden grain of the table. His silence was calm, not shaken. Julian watched him with the kind of protective warmth I had only ever seen in my father's eyes, years ago. Our food arrived, untouched for a while. Julian finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "For the speech, the humiliation, the way they treated you, all of it." "You don't need to apologize for their choices," I replied. "You stood up when it mattered. That says everything." Julian looked down at his plate. "I guess I should explain why I was ever with Alina in the first place. I didn't ask, but I listened. After Caroline passed," he began slowly, "I was in a dark place. Alina was the opposite of everything I felt, vibrant, social, confident. Being around her made me forget how sad I was, at least for a while." I nodded. That made sense. But as time passed, that brightness started to feel shallow. She never asked about my past. Never really listened. I started to notice how she treated people. And every time she talked about you, it was with this bitterness I couldn't understand. And then I met you again, and everything made sense. His phone buzzed on the table. "Amanda. Again." He silenced it without a word. "She won't stop calling for a while," I said softly. "I'm done," Julian replied. "She'll hear from my attorney." We both glanced at Elias, who had finished his meal and was now quietly sketching something in his notebook. A lighthouse, I think. He looked up and gave us a small smile, like he knew we were figuring things out. "Elias," Julian said, "do you remember the drawings you made for Caroline? The ones with the stars and planets?" He blinked. "You mean the ones I gave the lady in the hospital?" Julian smiled.
"Yeah.
That was my sister. She kept them next to her bed until the end. Elias sat up straighter. She said I made her laugh. You did. More than anyone. We didn't say much after that. There was nothing else that needed saying. The next morning, we visited the cemetery, just the three of us. The sun was gentle, filtering through the trees, and a breeze rustled the dry autumn leaves across the grass. Caroline's gravestone was small, simple, and beautiful. Julian placed fresh, white lilies on the stone. I stood behind him, holding Elias' hand as he reached into his pocket and took out a small, smooth stone, painted with a smiling sun and a trail of stars. I made it yesterday, Elias whispered. For her. He knelt and placed it gently beside the flowers. Then, quietly, he rested his fingers on the stone and said, "Thank you for being nice to me." Julian's breath hitched. I touched his arm lightly.
She would have loved that, he said.
We stood together in silence, hands intertwined, hearts open. I closed my eyes and whispered in my heart, "Thank you, Caroline, for everything." As we walked back to the car, Julian reached for my hand again. I didn't pull away. I didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone. 1 year later, the leaves had turned and fallen, and with winter came a quiet peace I had not known in years. I stood outside my small new office, a modest brick building in the heart of town, carefully hanging the sign that read Monroe Financial Services. My name, my firm, my future. Michael had insisted on the name. People should know who's behind the numbers, he said with that warm smile of his. Inside, the office was simple but welcoming. A soft gray sofa, shelves filled with ledgers and plants, Elias drawings pinned on the corkboard above my desk. Business was growing steadily, and the community was beginning to recognize the quiet precision I brought to my work. Elias, now 11, had grown taller and more confident. He had just been named captain of the soccer team and was finally starting to believe in his own magic, the same magic I had always seen in him. Michael, as always, was the calm in our storm. He still worked long hours, but always made time for dinners, homework, bedtime stories. He never missed a game or a late-night conversation on the couch. We were not married yet, but in every way that mattered. We were a family. As for Alina and Vivian, time had not been kind. Alina's reputation never recovered from the wedding scandal. Her friends drifted away. Her job offer slowed. And Vivian, still holding on to her pride, found herself increasingly isolated. She had called me a few times, left messages filled with vague apologies and guilt-coded demands. I never returned them. I didn't have space for that kind of pain anymore. On Christmas Eve, our small living room glowed with twinkling lights. Elias was already asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket, dreaming of the gifts he'd begged Santa for. Michael and I sat beside the fireplace, sipping cocoa in silence. There was no noise, no drama, just warmth. He shifted beside me and pulled a small box from his coat pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said. I turned, surprised. "What's that?" He opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate emerald ring, vintage and soft in its sparkle. "It was Caroline's," he said gently. "She told me, when you meet someone who reminds you what it means to love, give her this." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Let's make this official. Let's build this life together." I looked down at Elias sleeping peacefully, at the ring that once belonged to a girl who had changed my life, and at the man who had seen me when no one else did. I smiled, through tears. "We're already a family, aren't we?" Outside the window, snow had begun to fall, soft, steady, silent. A new beginning, wrapped in white.